Every school textbook gives you the same answer. Rome built roads to move armies. Roads followed the legions. Roads served the empire's military machine. That story is clean, simple, and taught in every classroom from London to Los Angeles. It is also incomplete in a way that costs you money every single day. The Roman road network was not a military gift to civilization. It was a revenue extraction system disguised as infrastructure. The engineers who designed it, the administrators who funded it, and the emperors who expanded it were not building paths for soldiers. They were building the arteries of a taxation machine so sophisticated that its effects on European wealth are still statistically measurable today in 2024, using satellite imagery of city lights from space. That is not a historical curiosity. That is a structural revelation about how power actually works, and it rewrites everything you think you know about why some regions of Europe are rich right now and others are not. Rome did not give its provinces roads. Rome gave its provinces the infrastructure to generate taxable wealth, and then Rome taxed that wealth. The roads were the mechanism. The revenue was the point. And the machinery they built was so durable that modern econometric researchers at the University of Copenhagen, the University of Gothenburg, and the CSIFO Research Network have documented its economic fingerprint persisting across 2,000 years of European development. 2,000 years. Think about what has happened in 2,000 years. The Western Roman Empire collapsed. The medieval period restructured European society from the ground up. The Black Death killed 1/3 of Europe's population. Nation-states rose and fell. 2 world wars reshaped the entire continent. And through all of it, the regions where Roman roads once ran still show statistically higher economic output than the regions where Roman roads did not reach. That is not coincidence. That is infrastructure as destiny. Rome's road network was 250,000 miles of engineered economic leverage, not prosperity distributed to grateful subjects. Leverage concentrated in the hands of the state. The distinction matters because it changes what you are looking at. When you see a Roman road as a gift, you see benevolent empire. When you see it as a structural bottleneck for taxation and resource extraction, you see something far more recognizable. You see the blueprint that China's Belt and Road Initiative is currently executing across Africa and Southeast Asia. You see the logic behind every modern infrastructure investment that comes attached to debt obligations and trade agreements. You see the machinery that turns geography into revenue. Rome engineered its roads to control the flow of goods, people, military force, and fiscal information. The roads were pressure points on the economic system of the ancient world. Control the roads, and you control the gatekeepers of commerce. Control the gatekeepers of commerce, and you control the concentration of wealth. Control the concentration of wealth, and you control the empire. That system is not ancient history. It is the operating logic of every major infrastructure investment program running on Earth right now. Welcome to Noob Historian. Behind every headline in your history book, there's a ledger they kept hidden. We open it. Right now, the United States Congress is still debating the economic returns on the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The Congressional Budget Office cited Roman infrastructure specifically as a historical benchmark for long-duration economic multiplier effects. The World Bank's 2020 infrastructure investment reports did the same thing. The most powerful economic institutions on Earth are looking at Roman roads to understand whether the roads and bridges America builds today will still generate wealth in 50 years. The answer Rome gives them is yes. But the answer comes with a condition attached. The wealth flows to whoever controls the infrastructure. It always has. The provinces of Roman Gaul did not become wealthy because Rome was generous. They became wealthy because Rome needed them productive enough to tax. The roads made extraction efficient. The extraction funded more roads. The system fed itself for 600 years. Today, China has invested over $1 trillion in infrastructure across 70 countries through the Belt and Road Initiative. The researchers at A-Data at William & Mary have documented the debt structures, the port access agreements, the trade route dependencies. The language is different. The mechanism is identical. You're living in a world still shaped by the infrastructure decisions Rome made between 300 BCE and 300 CE. The city nearest to you that has an airport, a major highway interchange, or a rail hub sitting on or near an ancient Roman road corridor is, statistically, wealthier than its neighbors. Not because of luck, because of infrastructure persistence effects that have compounded across 2 millennia. This is the story of how 250,000 miles of stone and gravel became the most durable economic weapon ever deployed, and why the people who built it never intended you to call it generosity. Before the first Roman road crossed a river or climbed a mountain pass, Rome had a fiscal problem. The Republic was expanding faster than its ability to administer, tax, and supply its expanding territories. The Italian peninsula was manageable. The provinces of Spain, Gaul, North Africa, and eventually Britain were not. Distance was the enemy of revenue. An empire that could not move tax collectors, soldiers, and census data faster than information decayed was an empire losing money at every frontier. The road network was the solution to a government accounting problem before it was anything else. Roman roads were funded through a mechanism modern economists would recognize immediately. The primary construction cost was not paid from the Roman treasury. It was extracted from the provinces themselves through a system called the munera, a form of compulsory labor taxation imposed on provincial populations. Local communities were required to supply workers, materials, and maintenance labor as a tax obligation. Rome supplied the engineering expertise, the surveying technology, the standardized construction specifications, and the oversight apparatus. The provinces supplied everything else. This was not generosity structured as infrastructure. This was infrastructure funded through the same extraction mechanism it was designed to accelerate. The provinces paid to build the roads. The roads made the provinces more productive. The increased productivity generated higher tax revenues for Rome. Rome used those revenues to expand the road network further. The loop was closed from the beginning. The engineering specifications Rome imposed on the system were not aesthetic choices. They were economic decisions embedded in stone. Roman roads were built in layers. The foundation, called the statumen, consisted of large flat stones that created a stable base. Above it, the rudous layer packed in rubble and cement. Above that, the nucleus layer of fine gravel and cement created a binding surface. The final layer, the summa crusta, used large flat stones or gravel depending on traffic volume and regional material availability. The standard road width for a major military and commercial road was between 14 and 20 feet, wide enough for two carts to pass each other without stopping. That width specification was not accidental. It was a throughput calculation. Roman administrators understood that road capacity determined commerce volume, and commerce volume determined taxable economic activity. A road too narrow to allow two-way traffic was a bottleneck that reduced revenue. The engineering specifications were fiscal policy expressed in construction standards. The road surface was crowned, meaning it was higher in the center than at the edges, to channel rainwater into drainage ditches running alongside the road. This was not a comfort feature for travelers. It was a maintenance cost reduction strategy. A road that drained itself required less labor to maintain and had a longer operational lifespan before requiring reconstruction. Roman engineers were solving a net present value problem. They were maximizing the economic return on construction investment over a multi-decade operational period. The milestone system, the miliaria, extended this logic into the information economy. Strabo, writing in approximately 7 BCE, documented the commercial transformation Roman roads produced in his geography. He described how road access converted previously isolated agricultural regions into active participants in the Mediterranean trading system. Goods that had previously moved only locally because transport costs made a long-distance trade unprofitable suddenly had access to markets hundreds of miles away. The roads did not create those goods. They created the economic conditions under which producing those goods for sale became rational. That is the precise definition of a market integration mechanism, and Rome built it deliberately. The cursus publicus, the imperial postal and transport service, operated exclusively on the road network and represents the most direct evidence of roads as a fiscal instrument rather than a public benefit. The cursus publicus was not open to ordinary travelers or merchants. It served state officials, tax records, military dispatches, and imperial communications. Access required an imperial permit called a diploma. The system was, in modern terms, a state-controlled logistics network built on top of a publicly funded infrastructure system with access reserved for the functions that served revenue collection and military control. The roads enabled commerce broadly. The cursus publicus captured the highest value movements for exclusive state use. This is not a minor distinction. It is the structural logic of infrastructure as power concentration. Rome built a network that raised all economic boats while simultaneously reserving the fastest, most reliable movement capacity for state functions alone. The financial returns on this construction investment were documented, at least partially, through the census system. Roman censuses recorded population, property values, and economic activity at the provincial level. Modern historians using those census records have traced the economic acceleration that followed road construction in specific provinces. Gaul, for example, showed significant increases in documented commercial activity within decades of the major road network completion under Augustus and his successors. Britain, connected to the continental network through the channel crossing infrastructure at Gesoriacum, modern Boulogne, developed a taxable commercial economy within a generation of the Claudian invasion in 43 CE. The roads did not cause prosperity as a side effect. They were designed to cause taxable prosperity as a primary outcome. The distinction between those two framings is the difference between seeing Rome as a civilizing force and seeing Rome as a revenue maximization system. The second framing is the one the econometric evidence supports. In the Austrian National Library in Vienna, under the catalog designation Codex Vindobonensis 324, sits one of the most significant economic documents in human history. It does not look like an economic document. It looks like a stylized, distorted map of the ancient world, 22 feet long and 13 inches tall, painted on parchment in the 13th century from a Roman original dating to the 4th century CE. This is the Tabula Peutingeriana, and it is the primary cartographic record of the Roman road network at its operational peak. It shows approximately 70,000 miles of documented roads, with distances between stations, major cities, river crossings, and waypoints marked across a territory stretching from Britain to India. The map's distorted proportions, elongated east to west and compressed north to south, reflect the Roman administrative priority. The road network as a linear system connecting revenue-generating nodes mattered more than geographic accuracy. The map was a logistics tool, not an atlas. What the Tabula Peutingeriana reveals, when analyzed alongside modern geographic information systems, is the deliberate economic logic of the road network's layout. Roman roads did not follow the most direct geographic routes between cities. They followed routes that connected the highest value economic nodes: mining regions, agricultural surplus zones, port facilities, and administrative centers. The road network was not drawn by engineers solving a pure geometry problem. It was drawn by administrators solving a revenue optimization problem, and then engineers executed that design in stone. The silver mines of Spain, the Argentifodinae Hispaniae, the grain-producing estates of North Africa, the tin extraction zones of Britain, and the copper deposits of Cyprus were all connected to the road network with a priority that exceeded their geographic significance. A mine producing silver for the Roman treasury received road access before a larger but agriculturally less profitable settlement. The infrastructure investment followed the extraction priority, not the population map. This is visible in the Tabula Peutingeriana, if you know what you are looking at. The road density in mining regions of Spain, modern Extremaduras and Andalusia, is disproportionate to the population distribution those regions supported. The same pattern appears in the Balkans, where gold and silver deposits in the Dacia province, modern Romania, received road infrastructure investment that connected them directly to the Danube supply line before the civilian settlement network in the same region was fully developed. Modern archaeologists working with LiDAR, light detection and ranging, satellite technology have refined the Tabula Peutingeriana's picture significantly. A 2021 survey using LiDAR mapping across sections of Roman Britain identified road segments that do not appear on any historical map, connecting known mining sites to known transport hubs through routes that avoid major settlement centers entirely. These were not roads built for general commerce. They were extraction corridors, built to move specific resources from specific locations to specific processing and shipping points with maximum efficiency and minimum diversion. The British LiDAR data specifically identified a road corridor connecting lead mining operations in the Mendip Hills, Somerset, to the Bristol Channel port facilities, with a branch line connecting to the Fosse Way, the major north-south Roman road across Britain, at Bath. Lead was a critical strategic resource for Rome. It was used for water pipe systems, for weights and measures standardization, and critically for silver extraction through the cupellation process. The road that moved Mendip led to Roman shipping was not built for the benefit of Somerset. It was built for the benefit of the Roman treasury's silver production capacity. The Tabula Peutingeriana also documents the relay station system, the mentions and mutationes, that made the road network an operational logistics infrastructure rather than just a physical path. Mansiones, spaced approximately 20 to 30 miles apart, a day's march or a full day's cart travel, provided accommodation, fodder, and vehicle maintenance for official travelers and their equipment. Mutationes, smaller relay stations, spaced 6 to 12 miles apart, provided fresh horses for the cursus publicus riders and basic supplies for commercial travelers. This station network transformed the road from a path into a supply chain. The spacing was calculated to match the operational limits of horses and oxen, the primary motive power of the ancient transport economy. A fresh horse at a mutario could maintain 8 to 10 miles per hour. An exhausted horse on an unserviced road dropped to 3 to 4 miles per hour. The relay station network effectively doubled or tripled the speed of official communications and high-value cargo movement across the empire. This speed differential between road-connected and road-disconnected territories was a structural competitive advantage for every economic actor operating within the Roman network. The economic geography this created is the foundation for what the 2018 Dalgard study found 2,000 years later. The regions where Roman roads ran, with their relay stations, maintenance infrastructure, and standardized travel conditions, developed commercial habits, settlement patterns, and market connections that persisted far beyond the road network's operational life. The physical infrastructure decayed after Rome's collapse. The economic geography it created did not. In 2018, Carl Johan Dalgard and his research team at the University of Copenhagen published a study that should have made front-page news in every financial publication on Earth. It did not. But what it demonstrated rewrites the economics of infrastructure investment in ways that are directly relevant to every government spending debate happening right now. Dalgaard's team used satellite nightlight intensity data as a proxy for economic activity. The logic is straightforward. Brighter regions at night correlate with higher energy consumption, which correlates with higher economic output, population density, and commercial activity. NASA's nighttime satellite imagery, available at high resolution across the entire globe, provides an objective, politically neutral measure of relative economic activity across geographic regions. The team overlaid this satellite data with the documented geographic coordinates of ancient Roman roads, using the Tabula Peutingeriana and archaeological surveys to establish the road network's precise location. They then ran statistical regression analyses controlling for terrain, climate, access to water, medieval settlement patterns, and modern political boundaries. The question was simple. After controlling for every other factor that explains why some regions are economically active, does Roman road proximity still predict present-day prosperity? The answer was yes, with statistical significance. Regions crossed by Roman roads show measurably higher economic output in the present day than comparable regions that Roman roads bypassed, even after controlling for the fact that Roman road builders naturally favored accessible terrain. The effect is not explained by geography alone. It is explained by the infrastructure itself and its long-duration persistence effects. The magnitude of the effect varies by region. In Western Europe, modern France, Spain, and Britain, where Roman road infrastructure was dense and medieval disruption was significant, the persistence effect is strong but not uniform. In Eastern Europe and the Balkans, where Roman infrastructure was less dense and political disruption across the medieval and early modern periods was more severe, the persistence effect shows more divergence. Some road-connected regions retained advantages, others did not. The 2022 University of Gothenburg study refined this divergence model, identifying the specific conditions under which the infrastructure persistence effect breaks down. The Gothenburg team found that Roman road advantages persisted through the medieval period in regions where the road infrastructure was absorbed into local governance systems, either through church administrative networks that used Roman road stations as diocese centers, or through early medieval kingdoms that inherited and maintained Roman road corridors as tax collection routes. Where neither of those absorbing mechanisms operated, where political collapse was complete and the road infrastructure fell into full disuse, the economic advantage dissipated within 2 to 3 generations. This finding is critical because it identifies the road network's economic effect as dependent on institutional continuity, not just physical infrastructure. The roads created economic advantages. The advantages persisted only when human systems maintained the commercial and administrative habits the roads had created. When those habits were disrupted completely, the advantage reset to zero over a period of roughly 60 to 90 years, 2 to 3 generations. When institutional continuity was maintained even partially, the advantage compounded across centuries. The 2019 Flickiger, Horning, and Larch paper published by CESIFO, and subsequently in the Review of Economic Studies, added the trade cost dimension that completes the economic picture. Their analysis calculated that Roman road transport cost 75% less per unit of distance than off-road transport using the same period as animal-powered vehicle technology. This is not a trivial cost reduction. It is a structural transformation of economic geography. At a 75% cost reduction, goods that were previously unprofitable to trade across distances greater than 50 to 100 miles became profitable to trade across distances of 300 to 500 miles. This expanded the effective market size for every producer within the road network by a factor of roughly 25 to 100, depending on the specific commodity and route. Grain producers in southern Gaul, who previously sold to local markets within a day's travel radius, could now supply the Rhine frontier military garrisons, 400 miles distant, at a price competitive with local supply. Pottery manufacturers in the Rhine Valley could undercut local producers across a territory spanning modern Belgium, the Netherlands, and northern France. The Flickiger team found commodity price convergence across Roman-connected territories. The same goods sold at prices that were 40 to 60% closer across connected regions than across comparable disconnected regions. This is the economic definition of market integration, and it is the same measure modern economists use to assess the success of the European Union as single market, the NAFTA trade zone, and other modern economic integration projects. Rome achieved, with stone roads and relay stations, a degree of market integration that the European Union has been working to replicate with electronic trading systems, regulatory harmonization, and border-free movement for 70 years. The Roman version persisted for 4 centuries at operational peak. Its effects persisted for 20 centuries beyond that. The combined findings of these 3 studies establish something that infrastructure economists have argued theoretically for decades, but rarely been able to prove empirically across long time horizons. Infrastructure investment generates economic multiplier effects that persist far beyond the operational life of the infrastructure itself. The Rome case is the cleanest natural experiment in economic history because the time horizon is long enough, the geographic variation is clear enough, and the documentary and physical evidence is rich enough to support statistical analysis that controls for confounding variables. The multiplier the Roman road network generated on its initial construction investment is, by any reasonable calculation, the highest documented return on public infrastructure spending in recorded history. Rome spent on engineering. Rome collected on commerce for 4 centuries. And then the system kept paying dividends for 20 centuries more, in the form of systematically higher economic output in road-connected regions across the entirety of Europe. The standard history curriculum gives you this: Roman roads. Let Roman armies move fast. That is true. It is also the least interesting and least economically significant thing the road network did for Roman military power. The deeper mechanism was supply chain compression. Roman military campaigns failed or succeeded primarily on the basis of logistics, not tactics. An army of 5,000 men required approximately 7.5 tons of food per day, grain, olive oil, and salted meat at the standard Roman military ration. A legion of 5,000 men also required fodder for roughly 1,000 horses and pack animals, adding another 5 to 8 tons of daily supply requirements. Moving 30 to 45 tons of supplies per day over unpaved terrain using ox-drawn wagons was, in practical terms, nearly impossible at campaign speeds. An ox-drawn wagon on unpaved terrain moved approximately 10 to 15 miles per day, with a load of 1,000 to 1,500 pounds. On a paved Roman road, the same wagon moved 20 to 25 miles per day with a load of 2,000 to 2,500 pounds, because the smooth surface reduced rolling resistance and the stable base allowed heavier loading without wheel damage. The road did not just move the army faster, it moved the army's food faster and in larger quantities per vehicle. It doubled the effective supply chain throughput. This had direct fiscal consequences. A Roman campaign conducted within road-connected territory cost substantially less than a campaign conducted in road-disconnected territory, because road access reduced the number of supply vehicles, drovers, and support personnel required per fighting soldier. Roman military accounting records, preserved in papyrus fragments from Egypt and on wooden writing tablets from Vindolanda Fort in northern Britain, document the supply cost differentials between road-served and road-unserved military positions. The Vindolanda tablets, discovered in a waterlogged archaeological deposit near Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain and dating to approximately 90 to 130 CE, include requisition records, supply accounts, and correspondence that reveal the daily operational economics of a Roman frontier fort. The tablets document grain purchases, beer requisitions, leather supplies, and equipment costs with an accounting precision that would be recognizable to a modern military logistics officer. They also document the cost premium for supplies delivered to positions without direct road access. The cost per unit was consistently higher, and the reliability of delivery was consistently lower than for road-connected positions. Caesar's own commentaries on the Gallic Wars, written approximately 58 to 49 BCE, predating the full Augustan road network expansion, document the campaign limitations imposed by road absence. Caesar repeatedly describes the construction of temporary roads, bridges, and causeways as prerequisite activities before advancing into new territory. His engineering units, the immunes, soldiers with specialist skills who were exempt from manual labor duties, built road infrastructure as the campaign's leading edge, not its support function. The road came first. The army followed the road it had just built. This sequencing reveals the Roman military's understanding of infrastructure as a prerequisite for economic and political control, not merely a convenience for troop movement. Caesar's legions did not build roads to march on. They built roads to make the territory they were crossing into territory that Rome could administer, tax, and supply on an ongoing basis. The military road was the first act of economic colonization. Augustus, who inherited and systematized Caesar's expansionist infrastructure logic, established the Cura Viarum in approximately 20 BCE, an official road maintenance bureau with a dedicated commissioner, the Curator Viarum, responsible for the upkeep of all major roads within Italy. He extended this administrative apparatus to the provinces through the governor system, making road maintenance a mandatory administrative function of provincial governance. Roads that fell into disrepair reduced provincial commerce, which reduced provincial tax revenues, which created a documented administrative failure that could end a governor's career. The military and fiscal incentive systems were therefore aligned in the same direction. Governors who maintained roads maintained tax revenues and maintained their careers. Governors who allowed roads to deteriorate faced revenue shortfalls and the political consequences that followed. The infrastructure maintenance incentive was built directly into the Roman administrative reward and punishment system. This alignment between individual career incentives and infrastructure maintenance outcomes is one of the primary reasons the Roman road network remained operational at high quality for 4 centuries, a maintenance performance that modern infrastructure systems with far superior technology frequently fail to match. The economic return on military road construction extended beyond campaign efficiency into post-conquest commerce. Every territory Rome conquered and connected to the road network became a new commercial node in the trading system. New nodes added new producers, new consumers, and new taxable commerce to the network. The military investment in road construction during conquest paid returns in commercial taxation during the following decades of peace. The ratio of conquest cost to post-conquest commercial revenue was, in territories like Gaul and Spain, extraordinarily favorable. Both provinces generated tax revenues that exceeded their conquest costs within 1 to 2 generations of pacification. Britain is the most documented case of this calculus in Roman administrative records. The Western Roman Empire did not collapse overnight. It decayed across approximately 2 centuries, from the crisis of the 3rd century, 235 to 284 CE, through the deposition of the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, in 476 CE. During that decay period, the road network did not disappear. It deteriorated in stages, and those stages of deterioration correlate directly with measurable economic contractions in the regions affected. The first sign of road network decay was not physical deterioration of the road surface. It was institutional deterioration of the maintenance system. The Curae Viarum, Augustus's road maintenance bureau, began losing funding as the fiscal crisis of the 3rd century forced Roman administrators to prioritize military spending over infrastructure maintenance. Provincial governors facing barbarian pressure on multiple frontiers diverted road maintenance funds to military fortification. The roads remained physically intact, but began accumulating deferred maintenance. The second stage was partial operational failure. Key bridge structures, which required more expensive and technically complex maintenance than road surfaces, began failing without replacement. A Roman road without its river crossings was not just inconvenient. It was commercially severed from the network. Bridge failure on a major road could isolate an entire commercial region from its markets, as effectively as destroying the road itself. The bridge failure pattern of the late Empire is documented in archaeological surveys across Gaul and Britain, showing clusters of commercial site abandonment that correlate with bridge maintenance failure rather than with direct military destruction. The third stage was the fragmentation of the cursus publicus. As the imperial administration contracted, the official postal and transport service lost its network coherence. Individual segments operated intermittently. The relay station infrastructure, the mansionese and mutationese, was either abandoned or converted to other uses by local populations. Without the relay station infrastructure, the road network's speed advantage over off-road travel collapsed. A road surface without relay stations is just a paved path. It moves people at walking pace rather than the accelerated, relay-enhanced speeds that made the network commercially superior. The economic consequences of this sequential deterioration were severe and swift. Modern archaeological surveys of commercial pottery distribution across Roman Gaul and Britain showed dramatic contraction in the geographic range of pottery commerce during the 4th and 5th centuries CE. Pottery from specific production centers, kilns in the Rhineland, Samian ware from central Gaul, had distributed across the entire Roman road network during the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, reaching Britain, North Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean. By the late 4th century, distribution patterns had contracted to regional circuits. By the early 5th century, they had contracted to local circuits. By the 6th century, in many areas, archaeological evidence shows no long-distance pottery commerce at all. This pottery distribution data is one of the clearest economic indicators of market integration collapse available from the archaeological record. Pottery is durable, abundant, and widely excavated. Its distribution patterns are a proxy for commercial connectivity across the territory it is found in. The contraction of pottery distribution, in exact correlation with road network deterioration and institutional collapse, is the archaeological evidence that confirms what the Econometrics studies found using satellite data. The road network created the market integration, and when the road network failed, the market integration failed with it. But the failure was not uniform. And this is the finding that makes the Roman road story directly relevant to every infrastructure policy debate happening right now. In regions where the Roman road network was absorbed into post-Roman institutional systems, the commercial geography it created persisted. The Catholic Church, which organized its administrative structure, dioceses and parishes, around Roman population centers and road station locations, maintained a version of the road network's connectivity through ecclesiastical communication and commerce. Church institutions required regular contact between diocese centers and the broader church hierarchy in Rome, and they used Roman road corridors to maintain that contact. This preserved commercial activity along those corridors even as the Roman state administration collapsed around them. The Benedictine monastery network, expanding across Western Europe from the 6th century onward, established monasteries at road junctions, river crossings, and former Roman station sites with a frequency that reveals deliberate infrastructure strategy. Monasteries required reliable supply access and communication with the broader monastic network. They positioned themselves at the nodes of whatever transport infrastructure remained functional. By doing so, they preserved commercial activity at exactly the points where the Roman road network had concentrated it. The University of Gothenburg's 2022 study documented this absorptive mechanism quantitatively, finding that regions where church administrative centers and monastery networks were dense showed stronger persistence of road-linked economic advantages than regions where those institutions were weak or disrupted by Viking Magyar or Saracen raiding during the 9th and 10th centuries. The institutional absorber, whether church, monastery, or early medieval kingdom, was the variable that determined whether 2,000 years of compounding infrastructure advantage or 200 years of decay followed Rome's collapse. This finding has direct implications for how modern economists and policymakers think about infrastructure investment. Physical infrastructure does not generate economic returns in isolation. It generates returns when embedded in institutional systems that maintain the commercial habits, the administrative connections, and the market relationships the infrastructure makes possible. Build a road, and then let the institutions around it collapse, and the road's economic advantage disappears within 2 to 3 generations. Build a road and embed it in institutions that absorb and perpetuate its commercial functions, and the advantage compounds for 20 centuries. The Roman road network was both the clearest proof of this principle and the longest-running natural experiment that tests it. The results are in. The satellite data confirms them. The answer is not ambiguous. In 2013, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced what was initially called the One Belt, One Road Initiative, subsequently renamed the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. By 2024, it encompasses infrastructure investment agreements with over 150 countries, a documented financial commitment exceeding $1 trillion, and a geographic scope stretching from East Asia to Western Europe, through Central Asia, South Asia, the Middle East, and East Africa. The Data Research Lab at William & Mary, Virginia, has produced the most comprehensive independent analysis of BRI financing structures, documenting over 13,127 individual BRI projects across 165 countries between 2013 and 2021. Their findings published across multiple reports including Belt and Road Reboot, 2021, and Banking on the Belt and Road, 2021, identify the structural mechanism of BRI financing with the same precision that Dalgaard's team applied to Roman road economics. The mechanism is identical in its functional logic, though contemporary in its legal structure. China provides infrastructure financing, roads, ports, railways, power plants, to developing nations through loans from state-owned Chinese banks, primarily the China Development Bank and the Export-Import Bank of China. These loans carry interest rates and repayment terms that are often more favorable than Western commercial lending, but come with conditions that include the use of Chinese construction firms, Chinese materials, and in many cases, Chinese labor. The infrastructure is built by Chinese entities, funded by Chinese loans, and frequently secured against strategic assets, ports, land corridors, resource deposits, if the borrowing nation defaults. This is not foreign aid. This is infrastructure investment as geopolitical leverage, precisely the mechanism Rome deployed through the Munera labor tax system. Rome extracted provincial labor to build infrastructure that extracted provincial wealth. China extracts debt obligations to build infrastructure that extracts resource access, port rights, and trade route dependencies. The vocabulary is modern. The structural logic is Roman. The most documented case is the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. China financed the port's construction with loans from the Export-Import Bank of China. Sri Lanka accumulated debt it could not service. In 2017, Sri Lanka signed a 99-year lease granting China merchants Port Holdings operational control over the port in exchange for debt relief. The infrastructure investment converted a financial relationship into a strategic territorial relationship. Rome called this a province. China calls it a strategic partnership. The World Bank's 2020 infrastructure investment analysis examining long-duration returns on infrastructure spending across multiple historical periods, cited Roman infrastructure economics specifically as the benchmark against which modern BRI-scale investments should be measured. The World Bank's conclusion was that infrastructure investments of the scale and geographic scope of BRI generate economic multiplier effects across the regions they connect, but that the distribution of those multiplier effects depends entirely on who controls the infrastructure nodes: the ports, the rail terminals, the road toll systems, and the logistics hubs. Rome controlled those nodes through the cursus publicus and the provincial governor system. China controls them through state-owned enterprise operating agreements, long-term lease structures, and debt-to-equity conversion provisions in its loan contracts. The node control mechanism is different. The economic outcome is structurally identical. The infrastructure builder captures a disproportionate share of the economic returns the infrastructure generates. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office is analysis of the 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. The Roman road network, based on the Dalgard, Flickiger, and Gothenburg study findings aggregated across a 2,000-year horizon, generated a multiplier that modern economists estimate in the range of 5 Schroeder to $10 per dollar of initial construction investment across the full operational and persistence period. No modern infrastructure investment program, with access to concrete, steel, GPS-guided construction, and modern project management, has documented returns approaching that magnitude. The reason is the time horizon, combined with the institutional embedding factor the Gothenburg study identified. Roman roads were built to last, maintained through a self-reinforcing fiscal incentive system, and absorbed into institutional structures, church, monastery, kingdom, that preserved their commercial function across the institutional collapse of the empire itself. Modern infrastructure investment programs are funded on 10 to 20-year political cycles, maintained through annual budget appropriations that compete with every other government priority, and embedded in institutions whose time horizon rarely exceeds one electoral cycle. Rome was not more technologically advanced than modern infrastructure builders. It was more institutionally committed to infrastructure as a long-duration revenue system. The engineers who built the roads understood they were building for a century, not for a budget cycle. The administrators who funded them understood that the return on investment was measured in generations, not quarters. The regions of Europe that sit on Roman road corridors are, right now, statistically wealthier than the regions that do not. Your country's infrastructure investment decisions are being made right now, and the economists advising those decisions are citing Roman road economics as the historical benchmark. The question they are trying to answer is the same question Roman administrators answered in stone and gravel between 300 BCE and 300 CE. How do you build infrastructure that keeps generating returns long after the builders are gone? Rome answered that question so definitively that the answer is still visible from space 2,000 years later. The road was never just a road. It was revenue, it was power, it was control, and it was the most durable economic weapon ever built. The countries building roads today are asking the same questions. The countries financing those roads are writing the same ledger, and you are living on the infrastructure of the answers Rome gave, whether you know it or not. Welcome back to Noob Historian. If you made it to the end of this one, you understand something that most people reading economic news today do not. The infrastructure debate is not new. It is not modern. It is not about technology. It is about who builds the network, who controls the nodes, and who collects the revenue the network generates. Rome built that system first. The satellite data proves it still works. The Belt and Road Initiative proves it is still being deployed. And the road under your feet, in whichever country you're sitting in right now, is part of a story that started with Roman engineers in the 3rd century BCE and has not finished yet.